Hey everyone. So today I'm going to talk about Baserow. It's a project that Bram VPS actually started around in 2019, and it's an open source no-code database tool and Airtable alternative. So of course, we kind of understand what an Airtable alternative should look like. So it's got a spreadsheet type layout, interface, um, and it's easy to put in and add new fields and so on. So if it's got all this covered, it's actually built under the hood with Django and Vue.js, but they're using Nuxt as a framework for Vue.js, and Postgres as the database source. And but the most exciting aspect actually of Baserow as an open source Airtable alternative is really two things. It's first of all, it's the API kind of like automatic API creation, and you will see that in a live demo in a bit when I run it and run it by myself. And then the way that the database is laid out, which helps kind of like increase the speed of the entire UI, but also of the database. It increases the speed by doing some nice things with indexing, but also the way just the tables are arranged are very unique. And I think it will give a lot of inspiration to all the tools that have a lot of like UI changes or extension to fields such as CRMs. And yeah, so for this reason, I want to highlight Baserow as kind of like a self-hosted open source Airtable alternative. They have, of course, kind of like your typical like deploy to Heroku button, which makes it super easy to get started. On their website, they also show you other alternatives, so Cloud Run or Docker or Docker Compose. But they have also a hosted version of Baserow, which takes care of course, database backups, speed improvements, and all that kind of jazz. So you can just sign up on baserow.io and get started yourself. I'll post a link in the description. The GitHub repo actually here is just a one-on-one mirror of the original GitLab project that Bram started, but it's got all the commits in here as well, so we can kind of like see how it's going. So around, I think February 15th, I checked was the first commit by Bram, and you can still see he's the most active contributor. Whereas like earlier this year or end of last year, a lot of new contributors actually came in and helped out with the project. Yeah, but without further ado, let's dive in. And for this, I kind of like pulled up the documentation here. You can also find this in the README right here. Just hit on Docker or Docker Compose or whatever you prefer to kind of like self-host the project yourself. I'm going to do with Docker because it's very straightforward. And I kind of like to get my hands dirty and just try things out and break things and fix it along the way. I've never been much of a tutorial or not tutorial, manual reader, let's call it that. But in any case, the documentation is well written and the quick started steps are very easy to understand. They have a lot of kind of like flags where you can optimize and kind of like individualize how the Docker image is or how the Docker container is run. One thing for sure, we're going to separate the database URL and use our own Postgres instead of the kind of like on disk Postgres installation. We'll do this mostly to kind of like have a look at how the database tables are arranged, first of all, in this video, but also further down the line, I want to have a separate instance so I can separate the backup processes from the core application, and also maybe swap out kind of the database tables, the database instances. Redis, we're going to leave the internal one, but of course we can also externalize those. And yeah, we're not going to do a fully qualified domain name today. We're just going to use an IP. And for this, I went over to DigitalOcean, but you can go anywhere to get kind of your virtual machine up and running. I chose DigitalOcean in this case and have kind of like my instance up and running right here. It's a 2 virtual CPU, 2 gig of RAMs, located in the Frankfurt region. Yeah. And in order to kind of like start my what I want to say, my database, I'm going to actually spin up a new database over at Railway. If you watched my previous, I did some shit. If you watched my previous videos, you've seen me use this tool quite a lot. It's just probably the fastest way, or maybe it is the fastest way of spinning up a database. So we've got our Postgres database. There's no data in here. We'll get a nice connection URL right here, which we copy over and use in the install script. Everything is good. The IP looks right. So otherwise we would have had to change this, but it looks right. And the container Baserow is already in use. So that's not great. Let me container Baserow. Okay, let's run it again. So it seems like I had run this before with the same name, but it's up and running now, and we can see the kind of like this script, what's happening here. You see in the background already some tables being created. There will be a lot more tables now, as you see. Yeah, you can follow along on here, what's happening. So first of all, it's creating kind of like our Django content type IDs, the migrations, of course, from Django. And then it's populating everything from the auth user all the way to the individual database field types, which are individual tables. And we'll get to this in a bit. This is what's so exciting about this project as well. In the meantime, I'll go over to the project, see if it's already up and running. It's not yet. So it's still creating the tables and double checking everything. While this is doing its work, we can have a look at kind of like the website and what this is all about, what they want us to know. I like that they offered the self-hosted versions right here. This is always super helpful. They're mentioning fast. It definitely is fast in terms of the reads and writes. And of course, you have that collaboration aspect as well. Usually I'm using this as a single player when I'm presenting this, but it does have that multiplayer kind of like feel to it. And you can invite your team, of course, and your users. I already mentioned it's written in Django and Nuxt. The API, we'll see the API kind of like being generated as well, based on the database. They have a bunch of templates that we can use already. And there's also a way of importing your existing Airtable data to Baserow. I'm not going to go into this, but they have definitely made kind of like the migration possible. So Further down the road, they're going to add a lot more enterprise features, kind of like better importing in general, and also be easier like forms. Yeah. All right. It seems like we're up and running. So let's try this again. And I don't have an account yet here, so I'm gonna just create an account real quick. And on startup, it will actually show me, or it will create a database for me alongside with some sample data in it. And I will just go through this. All right. It took a moment, but we're all good. We're live. So first of all, we have different hierarchies here. So we have Mark's group. So I'm Mark. And Mark's group is kind of like my workspace where multiple databases can live. I can create multiple groups and but for now, I just need one group and one database. And in this database, I have multiple tables. And I can see here, like to create another table. Each table has kind of their different fields, as you would expect in a spreadsheet UI. I can extend this and kind of like link, let's see, companies, link it to different projects. That's another table. So I can extend this and create new fields as I go along. So I'm just gonna attach some projects here over to Elon. He's running Tesla and SpaceX. And over at the projects table, I can see kind of how that looks like. Next up, I will show you, so we've got Elon here. So that's very nice. That's kind of what you expect. And of course, there's like a bunch of field types that you can go into and explore. We've got the API docs, and they're kind of hidden away under the database, like utility buttons. But so it's really nice. It creates in real time your like tables with the data that's in the table. So my customer table, it's using customers as kind of like the filler field for all these generated API docs, because that's the name of my table. And it's got all my fields that I have created, even the one that I just created just now, which is a relation field. So it takes in an array. It shows us all the different ways of how we can list fields, how we can list rows, how we can get a single row, and even create a single row, update a row, and so on. Everything you would expect from a REST API, this is being generated for you alongside the code that you need for executing this API, writing to the API, or reading from the API. So this is beautiful, especially if you have a project where you want to, type it in an easy to use no code way, but still use the data from the database in a different application, for example. So one person can write in here, and you as a developer or someone else on your team can use the API and actually reuse the data in another project. So how is that possible? And for this, I'm going to want to look a bit closer at the actual database. So at the database fields, I'm just going to call this Baserow, June 2020. What's great here is, besides all the functions, because it's Postgres, does support a lot of functions, we've got all these like different tables already built in. So we didn't create any of these tables, right? They were all created on startup. alongside the kind of like the test tables and our example database. Of course, we've got our kind of like auth user, which is me, which signed up, right, with my email. I have core applications which is a database, right? It's called Mark's company, and in the content type, I can actually see from the Django content type table that this is of type database. If we hit the Django content type, we actually see that there's a lot of content types defined here and on which model. So on the database model, we have basically all the different field types or content types defined right here, including the view, grid view, and the form view. So all the different views, but also all the different field types like date field, Boolean field, number field, etc., are defined right here, and they're being referenced across the different database layouts. Right here in our first table, which is called, well, if you go into database table, we see that our first table is of ID 5 and is called customers. So in database table 5, we actually see that the field information is right here. So we have field 35, 36, 37, and 38 referenced here, and with the content that lives inside these field within this table, right? Elon, Bill, Mark, and Jeffrey are exactly what we have here in the customers table under the name field, except that it's not called name field, it's called field 35. This is for a reason, because when we go into database field, we actually have from all the fields from all our databases, or from all our tables, we have our field types here defined with the content ID. And here we have the ID of 35, which is called name. So these are the fields that kind of like sit on top. This is your header rows, if you want. And I like this way a lot because it's very descriptive and gives a really good overview. And as you can see, you can create amazing API documentation with this, just by like structuring your database like this. And you can easily extend also the content type IDs by just adding another content type to the database, and then referencing it across your different database fields. For example, we have a long text field, and right here we have only one field ID. Of course, I didn't activate this. And if we go in here, we see that it's a notes field. It has the content type ID. And yeah, so this is the node field. We have only one node field that is filled up. It's on table 5. And if we go on table 5, we will see that field 37 is our notes field with the content in it. So I think this is super, super inspirational, and overall really great execution on building an alternative for Airtable. I hope you try it out. I'll leave a link below to Baserow.io where you can sign up. But you can like head over to GitLab. You see all the issues here, all the pull requests that are currently pending, and every hourly, if not more frequently, the develop branch will be updated, so you can like be in the know what's happening with this framework. It's really cool. I enjoyed running this myself. It's super easy, and I can also imagining contributing back to this project with some ideas of my own. But in general, it's very simple to get started, and I will do a more deep dive video in the future, but for now, check out the projects on GitHub and GitLab, and yeah, have fun exploring it yourself. So, thanks so much for listening in today, and hope to see you next week.